Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome back to our next session about the false ego, preparing us for the big topic of men and women in spiritual culture. And yes, false ego is a tricky fella, so we somehow or other have to understand how to identify our own false ego a little bit, right? And I think the easiest way to do so is to look at what's actually the purpose of Vaishnava etiquette and culture. Right? Say you'll be able to follow Vaishnava etiquette word by word, to the dot, absolutely correctly. Right? How would you act? You would act as if you're free of false ego, actually. I mean, it's one aspect, it's not the whole aspect of Vaishnava etiquette and culture, but the big aspect is to actually help us not acting on the false ego platform. And we will discover that actually when we look into Vaishnava etiquette, we will discover that in many aspects of Vaishnava etiquette and culture, that is actually an effect of it. But let's look at one specific part, which also makes it very obvious when we understand it, how often we actually act every day on the false ego platform. One aspect of Vaishnava etiquette is a Vaishnava should not defend himself or herself, right? We talk so much about the four propensities of material life, eating, sleeping, mating, defending. We talk so much about reducing eating. Obviously, right? If you just fill your stomach and you're like a pig, I mean, really, what's the point? We have to, control our eating, control the tongue, So also the speaking, but eating, sleeping, mating, defending. Sleeping, okay, we don't want to be in Tamagoon, right? Sleeping is ignorance, so we want to reduce that to the bare minimum to keep our body alive, right? And then mating, of course, sense gratification distracts us from our spiritual life, completely shifts the focus away from it, also makes us unclean and so on. Right? But we're not talking so much about defending, right? Defending, well, we not really have to walk around with a gun, because behind the next tree there is a person, attacking us or so. We're not so much talking about defending, but defending is not only on the gross level. Whereas eating, sleeping and mating obviously has subtle effects on the subtle body as well, but it's more on the gross level. Whereas defending is actually a propensity of the subtle body, especially the false ego. Right? If I come into a room full of devotees with my very gentle nature, so gentle that a friend of mine coined the term Germaniac, yeah, in a very friendly way, of course, he meant it, right? So if I come in with my gentle nature and ask very mildly, who left the light on? Why is the oven still on? You finished cooking, right? Everyone will immediately jump on the seat, hands up, wasn't me. And that's where we defend ourselves. Even if we're not even directly, personally attacked. We defend ourselves. It wasn't me. I was distracted. Or the phone was ringing. So many things, right? So many excuses. And that's the false ego. We're acting on the false ego platform then. Nothing else. That's how we can identify that the false ego is in control. We're defending. It's a propensity directly of the false ego. A Vaishnava should not defend himself. But what should a Vaishnava do? He should be ready to defend other Vaishnavas if they're wrongfully accused of anything, if they're attacked, if they're exploited. We should defend. Right? And why? Because that helps us purifying our false ego. We put ourselves out for others. We open ourselves up for attack by others. And that's not what the false ego wants to. False ego wants to be left alone and, he's attacked now. Lucky it's not me this time. Woo-hoo-hoo. Our envy comes out in that way. So that's why, as Vaishnava, we shouldn't defend ourselves, but we should be ready to defend everyone else. To purify our false ego. Right? If we defend ourselves, we're acting on the false ego. And just to understand that a little bit more better, we can say, well, take this example of Radhanath Maharaj, how actually he explains how if there are two dogs fighting, which dog will win? It's the dog you're feeding. So if you want ultimately your real ego to win, you cannot feed your false ego. You have to starve it. And that's what Vaishnava etiquette does. You're not defending yourself. You're not allowing the false ego to act. You're starving it. If you allow your false ego freely to act, you will feed it, make it stronger. Right? So with that understanding, and especially with that example, when we look into our lives, we're defending ourselves every day. We don't have to look at big examples like Srivas Thakur, right? All the envious brahmanas, they would talk about the devotees doing kirtan at Srivas Thakur's house. Oh, they're screaming and laughing all night. I know. They abduct some young girls in the forest during the day and then they enjoy them at night. That's why they're screaming so much. And then one day those brahmanas, so-called brahmanas, anyway, they would put Durga Puja paraphernalia outside Srivas Thakur's house. Wine, blood, all the paraphernalia they need, right? And so everyone in the morning could see what they are doing at night in Srivas Thakur's house. They want to ruin him, ruin his reputation. And what did Srivas Thakur do? Well, he's a devotee. He was the first up in the morning, right? He was going outside his house and see it all. Oh my God, all the paraphernalias here. What did he do? He didn't quickly try to hide it and wash it away and so on. No, he was going around in the whole village and calling everyone. Everyone wants to know what we're doing at night. Please come and look. And then the envious persons, we knew it. But all the righteous persons said, oh my God, who did that to Srivas Thakur? But he didn't care what people were thinking. He was not acting on the false ego platform. Right? And for us, we defend ourselves, for leaving the light on. Wasn't me. I got a phone call. We hide. Immediately we hide. We're trying to hide. We hide when we did something wrong. Try to shift blame on someone else. Just indicates, again, another indicator, how much we're actually acting on the false ego platform. Right? And that prevents us from engaging in devotional service. There are two things the false ego does not like. It doesn't actually mind you becoming a devotee. Doesn't mind at all. Why? Because there's so much opportunity to shine yourself, to be the kirtan star with the perfect voice and great musical abilities. You have the greatest book scores. You can be the best preacher, the best cook. So many great things, the false ego can be proud about. You can, puff yourself up. That's material life, right? We bring that from our material environment, from our material conditioning. We bring that in devotional service, so the false ego doesn't mind, right? There's even this nice story how a devotee came to Srila Prabhupada and said, Srila Prabhupada, I'm the most fallen. What does Srila Prabhupada answer? You're not the most anything. You can even be puffed up about being the most fallen. And Srila Prabhupada understood it, and cut it down straight away. No way. You're not the most anything. Right? So the false ego doesn't mind us becoming a devotee, but there are two things which the false ego does not like at all. And that is Vaishnava etiquette and culture. That's the first part. Why? Because, as we discussed, it's going to starve the false ego. It makes it weak. Right? We're not allowing the false ego to act so, like when we're not training, we become weak. You know? We have to practice, and we stay strong in whatever we practice. Be it musical instruments, being sports, being memorizing, whatever. You know. So we need to practice, and then we stay strong in that aspect. So we're not allowing the false ego to act. We're exposing our false ego. False ego can't stand it. It's like when you act according to Vaishnava etiquette and culture, if you're dealing with your false ego actively, trying to understand it, try to subdue it, it's like cornering an animal. And let's be frank, what we're doing as devotees, we are committing complete material suicide, right? We don't want to just get rid of that gross body. That's pretty easy. Just kill yourself. Doesn't make a solution, because the subtle body carries us again into the next gross body. So we have to kill the gross and the subtle body. And if you corner an animal, even if it's just like a little rabbit, a little deer, some really mild animal, if you corner the animal, it will defend itself if you threaten that animal. If you corner it, it will kick, it will scream, it will bite, it will hiss. According to whatever that animal can do, it will defend itself. It will fight for its life. And that's what the false ego is doing. We have to expect it. We corner it. Vaishnava etiquette and culture, dealing with our false ego, specifically trying to learn how our false ego works, how we can get rid of it. It will defend itself. And one of the best areas is actually men and women. Because especially in the Grihasta Ashrama is the greatest opportunity for that purification. And it's the most conducive for the man and for the woman. In different ways. And again, there's a big misunderstanding how that purification takes place. We hear about that later on in the presentation. But for now, that's the first thing the false ego doesn't like. Right? And Bhaktitirtha Maharaj on his last public appearance was saying exactly that. His body was completely riddled with cancer, his leg already amputated. And he said, this body is already dead. Now, his gross body is already dead. Now the subtle body has to die. That's why he went into seclusion and really focused on killing his false ego. If there was any left, I don't know. Probably not. Just to give an example for us. Right? So, that's the first thing the false ego doesn't like. Vaishnava etiquette and culture. The second part is, of course, pure devotional service. Right? Especially pure chanting of the holy name. There's this beautiful example how chanting is actually a yajna, a sacrifice. We're saying Harinam Yajna Ki Jai, you know? Sankirtan Yajna Ki Jai. But how is it a yajna? And this is a nice description how the tongue is the ladle, and the tongue pours the pure ghee, the pure holy name, the pure ghee onto the sacrificial pit. That's the ear, and from that pit, that ghee, the pure ghee of the holy name enters the fire, the heart, and burns very brightly. It brings out the fire of devotion, burns very brightly. From the holy name, by the ladle of the tongue, entering the ear, going all the way to the heart, and then the fire of devotion burns brightly, and also burns away all the anarthas, all the upadhis, all the false designations, our false ego, and so on. Bang, gone. Right? So Vaishnava etiquette and culture weakens our false ego, and then the holy name comes in for the kill. right? And it's very clear, between the ear and the heart is a lot of clutter, a lot of gunk, lots of yucky stuff, right? Lots of luggage which is in the way. So we chant and chant, and the key of the holy name enters the ear, but somehow it doesn't get quite through. But if you combine both aspects, it's like two tracks of a train, pure devotional service headed by pure chanting of the holy name, and then you add the Vaishnava etiquette on the other side, it clears away that clutter in the heart, or between the ear and the heart, then the progress is much faster. Yeah. So I'm not advocating here in stopping devotional service, just focus on Vaishnava etiquette. Oh, but we will focus in that presentation on Vaishnava etiquette. But both go hand in hand. Remember that. It's a nice example. The false ego is purified, or it's weakened by the Vaishnava etiquette and culture, but only then the pure devotional service, the pure chanting, the pure holy name goes in for the kill. Right. So now we learned how to identify our false ego, how our false ego actually acts, right? Through defending. Not only, but it's a good indication for ourselves, because we notice it. I did it again. First we unconsciously do it, and I hope that at least makes you, my presentation today, makes you a little bit consciously incompetent. Because once you're conscious of it, you want to change it. You become aware of it, and there's some impetus there for change. And if that's all you want to take away from that whole presentation to come, well, that's something really important. Right? So I'm looking forward to go further into the presentation. And again, remember, you're not the body, number one. And number two, discover how your false ego is acting by defending. And believe me, there will be plenty of opportunity for you to recognize your false ego trying to defend itself during that presentation. If that's the case, if it starts blocking your ears, right? Because so much stuff comes up in the mind, like, that's not fair, and how can he say that, and how does he mean it, and I know better. Right? The false ego is whispering and whispering, and the mind becomes agitated, and then the ears are blocked. We're not hearing. We're not actually able to listen. We're not actually able to listen anymore. And that's all the false ego. You will notice that once you actually deal with that false ego a bit more deeply. If you try to understand that false ego more deeply, then you will be able to recognize exactly the situation as exactly what it is. The false ego is cornered and doesn't want you to go there, because it's the beginning of the end for it. It's the beginning of the end for it. Once you accept Vaishnava etiquette and culture and pure chanting of the holy name, that's it. Rien ne va plus for the false ego. That's it. So the false ego doesn't want you to go there. And men and women in spiritual culture, Grihasta Ashrama, is that ashram where we receive the most purification for the major part of our lives. And if we get that right, that's it. False ego can rest in peace, and it doesn't go down without a fight. Keep that in mind when you go through the presentation with me, and I'll try to make it entertaining. There will be most likely another little miscellaneous introductory part before we head into the nothing box and laugh our way not only to a better marriage, but to a better devotional life. Thank you so much for your kind attention, and I hope I'll see you again next time. Hare Krishna.